to choose the user location. I want to leave this user here in Nigeria. I can as well change the location for the user. And then it's asking if I want to create this user and give the user a particular license, right? So I can decide to give this user a license, but let's even say that I don't have a license to give to this user. Does it mean that I cannot proceed? So I can proceed only if I check create user without product license. Because if I do not give license to this user and I do not select this, I will not see the option to do next. So I will click on next. So when I do next, here is optional setting, right? So for the optional setting, it will mean if I want to give this user an admin role, I can go ahead and give the user an admin role. And then take note of this again. I cannot click any of these administrative roles because by default, it is selecting user, no admin center access. So for me to give an admin role to this user, I need to first now click on this, and then it is only then all this can be activated for me. Now for me to understand the function of each of these roles, I will have to place my cursor at the front here to see the description of it. And this is saying full access to exchange online, create and manage group, manage service requests, and monitor service health. If I come down here, I will see the next thing, and then I will choose to give the role that I want to give to the guy. So if I check help desk, let's say help desk resets and re-authenticate for all non-admin and some admin roles, manages service request and monitor service health. Let's say this is what this guy is going to do for me. I can choose to give him the role by clicking on this, but there are more granular rules that you can see down below when you click on show all by category. You are going to see. So the downside here that I must quickly tell you is that it is on until you move your cursor to the more information icon, you cannot read the instruction or the rules, I mean the permission that this particular rule has, right? So when you're done with that, of course you can, when you're done with the role assignments, you can come down to this other point, which is also the second optional feature, I mean optional detail, to provide profile information about the job title, the department you want to have the user, the office that you're going to have the user, and all these other details here for you to enter as optional, settings. So when you have done this, you will have option to click to next, and then just so when you review this detail and you find out that this is all good, that the display name of this user is correct, and then you have said it should auto generate password for you, and then you have not given this user a license, and then the role that you've given to this guy is the help desk administrator, and then you have option to edit any of these that is not correct. Then if you feel that this is good, then you can click on finish adding user. So that means at the end of this process, we're going to have user called Azure Show created, and it is saying that Azure Show added to active users. Azure Show will now appear in the list of active users. So what I want us to do now is to, now the password is here. So if I want to send it, I will have to show this and then copy this user detail and forward it to the person that is resuming in this organization. So I just want us to quickly see the user that we just created, and the user is Azure Show. And if I do this, I'm going to have the user show up under the list of the active users now, and I can sign in with this user's email address and password. Remember that I said that the user should change password when he first signs in. So having said that, I will just come to this other side, the Entra ID. So what's the difference? Watch out for it. The properties is coming out and it is more detailed on the first glance, unlike the other one where you have to click and then you click on show more properties to enter the optional details. But if you look at all of these details that are here, the city, the state, the province, the country, and all of this would require that you enter. I mean, it is not they are not required field. That's what I'm trying to say. So it means that you can go to the next phase without entering these details. But one thing that is very important is here. So here is saying, is this guy going to be your user, internal user, or is he going to be a guest user? But of course, so for member means it's an internal user. For guest, of course, is an external user who is invited to your environment. So I'm not going to fill anything here. I'm just going to do next to role assignments, and now mark the difference that is here. When you get here, say no assignments to display. Good. So the next point you want to do is to either add an administrative unit, which we'll cover later, add a group, or add a rule. From what we did in the M365, we added a rule. So mark the difference between this and what we had in the M365 admin center. You would see that there are a lot of things that are displayed here, and the descriptions are just here for you to see what they do. Application administrator, application developer, that is one, and it will tell you what it does, so you can do a comparison right now and see. You can read and understand what these roles are doing. One advantage. Second advantage is that these are arranged alphabetically. Unlike M365 that started with Exchange Global Admin, there is no order there. So if I want to look for something here, I'm looking for Global Admin, so I can just quickly get down to G, and I see Global Administrator, I see Global Reader, and I see other roles that are in G, Guest Inviters, and the rest. So if I'm looking for a role that starts with V, I should come down to V and I should be able to see it easily. That is not the same thing when you are working and you are creating a user in M365 here. So if I'm just quickly going to do that so that you can see it again, then you would see that there are rules. Create a user without these. There are rules, for example, here, rules. You would see that it is not arranged. This Exchange Global and help desk, service support administrator, and they are just not arranged. And if you come to this place, the reset is not just. So it is easier to quickly look through what you have in M360, in Entra ID, see the rules. And from my observation, I see there are more granular rules here to assign than what you have there. So you may want to check it out. What rule is here? I think it's going to form a very good documentation. What rule is in Entra and is not available in M365? You should be able to spot out one or two. So, but I've not done that myself, and I think one day I'm just going to do that. So I just want to say, okay, I don't have a role assigned to this user. So because role assignment is also optional, I can just click on the next one, which is here, to review and create. So review is just going to tell me everything that I've created about the user. The guy is AI show. That's this guy's name, the display name. So I'll just hit on create. And then I expect this user to be created now. So successfully created. So what I would do is to come to this place and I put this in, and I should be able to see the AI guy showing up for me. Good thing is that the handshake is just now. So if I check the Azure guy also, I should see him right away in Entra Admin Center, right? So that is how it is, because the Entra Admin Center actually is the directory that actually houses these objects that we are creating. So I'm sure that my time is running out already, but I hope you've been able to see how to create user from the on-prem environment, how to create use, and you differentiate that from how to create user in M365 Admin Center, and the difference between that and when you are creating that user in Entra ID. You can compare the features. I am actually writing on um, creating and managing objects in M365 and on the on-prem environment, and that document will be available on Monday, let's say by 10 a.m. WAT. So you can just look out for it on LinkedIn. So you can just grab all these details that I just showed you and more. And I want to be using that document going forward so that we can follow a particular routine to understand how objects are created and how they are managed in both cloud and the on-prem environment. So I want to hand the microphone over to the team so that we can listen to Jerry speak about Azure rules. Thank you very much for your time.
Brilliant. Again, Joseph, excellent, very clear, great presentation. So, Solomon, over to you to share your screen with us.
Yup, I'll be sharing my screen now.
Yeah,
I think a lot of stuff
yeah,
is
we
fine.
got it there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm sharing my screen now, and thank you so much, Joseph, for your presentation. And also, it was nice seeing that we could create users from on-prem, and also we can still create them from the cloud. And I think in most cases, right, some organizations that are, they've been for some time, they have like an on-premises environment. Most times you just see them, they create their user from the server, then sync it to the cloud. And once they sync it to the cloud, then they can also manage some of the resources or some of the objects from the cloud. That was also a nice presentation where you can as well see the different areas where you can, create these users. So today, what I want to actually speak about is I was talking about the Azure roles. That's role-based access control, and I started by explaining the how we need to control access to resources in the cloud. And when we were looking at how we can, manage control access to these resources in the cloud, we also spoke about the role assignment, where we were also talking about the elements. And when we were mentioning these elements, we spoke about the service principle. So when we're talking about the service principle, basically it just comprises of the users, the group, the sorry, I mean the security principle, not the service principle. So we spoke about the security principle, and the security principle is just the users, the group, the service principle, and also the manage identity on Azure. So after speaking about that, we also spoke about the role definition, which is basically collection of permissions. So we have different permissions that, that are, grouped together to form a particular role. And I gave an example of what that is. So after looking at the role definition, we also spoke about the scope, which is basically like a set of resources that we want to apply this particular role on. That's what the scope is, and it's just a way we can as well narrow down this particular scope we're applying to a particular user. So that is for Azure. But then on the other side, we have the Entra. And if we are looking at the Entra, we also have roles for Entra, and then we also assign roles in the Microsoft Entra. So when we're looking at the Microsoft Entra, it's actually similar when we are talking of, this role-based access control, and also when we are talking about the built-in roles. But then one thing we should know is the Microsoft Entra roles, they are basically controlling access to Microsoft Entra resources, such as the users, the group, and applications using the Microsoft Graph API. On the other hand, the Azure roles, they control access to Azure resources, such as, the storage we have using the Azure resource management. So, but then if we just try to look at the built-in roles and we're trying to create, custom roles, right? The permissions that we have on the Microsoft Entra roles, that's the Microsoft Entra roles, the permissions, we can't actually use them for the Azure custom roles. And the same way goes for the permissions we have in the Azure. And if we're also looking at the role assignments in the in the Microsoft Entra, we also have the security principle as well as when we are talking about the elements for role assignments in the Microsoft Entra. We also have the security principle, and what basically the security principle is the user, the group, or a service principle. We also have the role definition, which I also explained, that has to do with collection of permissions, and then we also have the scope. So when we are looking at the scope in Azure, we are basically looking at the level in Azure where we have the management group, we have the subscriptions, then we have the resource group, and then we are looking at the resources itself. But for the when we are talking about the scope in Entra, we are looking at the tenants. We are probably assigning role org wide, right? The security principal is going to be having access to objects in that tenant. And we can as well still look at how we can, use the administrative unit. So we can use the administrative unit to um, control the access to a particular set of, let me say, resources. Like we can create an administrative unit, assign permission to a particular user, and then we just want this user to be able to control objects like users or group that we have in the administrative unit. And there's something about the administrative unit that I actually like, which I might just show when I'm in the portal, is when we are using the administrative unit now, we can actually restrict access from users, or let's say we have given a security principal permission on our org-wide tenant, we can actually restrict that access on a particular administrative unit and then give access to maybe another user to control the administrative unit. So we have all of these to look at in the cloud. So what I'm just going to do is, after explaining all of this, I would just look for my tenant. So this particular tenant I have opened up, what this tenant is actually showing us right now is this is just a test user. And if we look at this test user, if I click on the virtual machine, this test user doesn't have access to any resources in Azure at the moment. So what I want to do is I want to log into my account right now. Let me just type this on another screen, and then I'm going to pull it over to this other screen. Okay, great. So right now I'm signed into my account. So remember the last time I went to the resources that I actually wanted to, assign a particular role to. So if I come to, let me just go home, what is opened up? So I can pick this subscription. So if I pick this subscription now, when we are talking about scope, right, we can pick where we want to assign these permissions to, or these roles to. So if you look at this subscription now, I can choose to say, hey, I want to assign the role to this particular permission. But then what if I don't want the user to have access to other resources that would be under this, or let me say all other levels that are below this subscription? Because if you assign this to a level that's maybe the root level, the roles get inherited by the subsequent levels. So if I'm assigning it to the subscription right now, what that simply means is that particular role would be inherited by the resource groups that will be under this particular subscription. And also the resources there, the role also would also be inherited. That means that particular security principal would have access to all the resources within that scope. So that's why it's more like, when we are talking of scope, is assigning these roles to a set of resources. So for this particular subscription, I explained how we would see the roles by coming to add roles. But if we just click on roles here, you would see we have like the contributor role, we have the owner, the reader, and all of that. So what I want us to do real quick is I would just come to, let me come over to, let me go down to resource group, and then I'm going to look for a resource group. So this is the resource group, and then I will just come down to this virtual machine. So you can see that I actually narrowed down how I want to assign my role. So just imagine I have a level one support engineer, and I want the level one support engineer to be able to manage this virtual machine. So if I assign the role to the level one engineer at the subscription level, what that is going to cause is every other virtual machines, apart from virtual machines, storage and other resources we have, that level one engineer will have access to those resources. So for me to narrow down that, I'm coming to the exact resources. And when I get to these resources, I can still narrow down the role I want to give the support engineer by going to the job function roles. So for the job function roles, I can easily just, say, I want to give you the virtual machine contributor role. So let me just do this virtual machine. I think it should bring that out. So if I pick this particular role now, which is the virtual machine contributor role, I can then click on next. Remember, we have the privileged administrator roles. These roles, you need to actually handle them in a secured manner. So I would not be giving this to the level one support engineer. So I'm just going to go next, and we can as well just see what I was talking about when we are speaking of the security principles. So we can assign this to users, the group, service principal, and manage identities. Identity. So what I would do is I'm going to select a user now, and the user I will select is the test user I just showed you earlier. So once I select the test user, I can just add the test user. Now that I've added the test user, I'm just going to go next. And once I go next, I would just review and assign. So now that user should be able to see this virtual machine once I log into the other side. So before I actually go to the other side to actually see what is happening there, let's just look at creating custom roles. So, we have these roles, and the last time I was able to open each of these roles, and we could see we have actions, what you can perform, and also we still have data actions, right? We have the JSON, and the JSON is just showing us what this particular role can do. And if you look at it, you will see the scope. We're having like that actually means this particular um, role is assigned on the root level. So I think I'll probably do a video to explain this more because there are more to say about this. So we have the permissions where we have the actions, and this is all. We have not actions, data actions, and for data action is just like a backup for the actions and not actions. So we have data actions and not data actions. So for user that probably have permission to control access for all, like we are giving the user all the permissions, right? We can choose to, say we don't want this user to have access to a particular data, right? Or storage. We can always add that here, but I'm not going to do that now. So this is just what these permissions look like. And if you look at, we can see a whole lot of permissions. So why I'm showing you this is sometimes I could probably want to assign the virtual machine contributor to a user, but then there are some permissions there I don't really want the user to have access to. I can then create a custom role. So if we come back let me just come back to overview, and I click here. Once you see this, you'll see add custom roles. So what this actually does for us is once I click on the custom roles, I can actually create a custom role. So now this is what I want to do. I'm going to just call this help desk refine. So once I call this help desk refine, I can always put this is for help desk working on virtual machine. So you know why I'm writing this, because you're probably working with other engineers, and then you actually want to tell these engineers that, hey, this is exactly why I'm creating these custom roles. So it's actually very, very useful to add descriptions. So we have different options. We can choose to clone from a role. We can choose to, start from a JSON, and then we can start from scratch. So I'm just going to leave this in scratch to start from scratch. Now we can add the permissions. So for the permissions now, if I search for virtual, I should see compute. So yeah, so this is Microsoft's compute. I could then, pick what I just want the help desk to do on this particular role I'm creating, so I can assign it to them. So I'm just going to add this. So once I add this, you can see these are the permissions. Last week I explained why we might not need to use the not action when we are creating roles like this. So what I would do next is I will just go next, and by the time you come here, you can see this scope is the scope where I'm creating this particular role is on this subscription. So what that simply means is if this role is created on this scope, which is the permission, if by any means I want to go to maybe the management group to assign a user a particular role, I would not find this particular role I'm creating. So, but if I want to change that, I can always add scope and change the scope. So this is what is going to happen. I would just leave this here, and then I'm going to go next, and you can see what it looks like. I can choose to download this and keep it. Most times you can even download from the Microsoft in built-in roles for Azure and then edit it the way you want it. So I would not be using this right now because I'm just selecting actions, and the actions are not that much. So I'll go next. And once I go next, I can then create this particular role. So once this is done, if I come to let me just go to a resource group and then go to the virtual machines and select this virtual machine. If I come to add role assignment. So once I come here and I search for that was help desk with. So this is not here. We just need to give it some time. Should I refresh? Let me refresh. It should be back. So now let me try this again. So this is not coming out. Let me just go back to home, and then I'll click on this again. I'll click here and I'll add rows, and then I just want to, sorry, not custom. Oh, I just remember what I did. I applied this to this. Let me go to the scope, and then let me search for this. So yeah, so this was the role. So I did the scope I created it for was the subscription. So this is the role I created. So if I want to assign any user this, I can just go next, and then I can assign that particular role to a user that I want to assign that role on. So what we can do now, I can just come to this portal real quick, and let me just refresh and see if, so I'll click on the virtual machine, and now you see we can see the virtual machine. So this user can choose to carry out any of the permission that was granted when I was assigning the role to this user. So this is just how we assign the Azure roles. But then on the other hand, because of time, if we want to do that for the Entra, right? The Entra is almost the same thing, but then if you notice this, we can always come to, let's do this. I'm just going to go to all services. The Entra ID is one of the services we have here. And if I scroll down to identity, I guess I just passed identity. Okay, so this is identity, and then I'm just going to click on this. So once I click on this right now, I can choose to come to roles and administrator. So the good thing about this is it is free when you get one of Microsoft's online business services like the Azure and the M365. You get the Entra ID free, but then the Entra ID, we also have licenses. We can choose to use the P1, P2 licenses, and we still have the free one. Then we have the governance. But then one thing you're going to see is I can easily assign roles from the entry ID, but I cannot create a custom role because I don't have the P1 license. So if we come here right now, I can choose to assign a user any of this role. And one thing you're also going to see is we have these tags called privileged. So what this is actually doing is for any role that have at least one or more privileged permission, you're going to see this tag on that particular role. So if I click on this particular role now and I go to the description, so when you're looking at this description, we just need to look through the tags. And when we are looking through the tag, you can see we have one permission with the privilege. And if we keep going, you will probably see more of those tags on this particular permission. So once you're creating your own custom role and you're giving them any of these privileged permission, you're going to see the role having this particular tag on them. And for us to create the custom role, I just want to bring this up here and then I'll be done for now. Let me just pull this here. So this particular tenant, for this particular tenant, I have the P2 license. So what you would see now, you see I have the option to create a custom role, and I can, give it whatsoever I want to give it. I could just say, so, and so once I give this, I can see start from scratch, clone from custom roles. I can go next. And at this point, we can pick permissions. Now, remember I said for you to see this permission and privilege tag, you need to give this one, at least one. So I'm just going to pick one privilege tags. So this is just me picking random stuffs, right? And then I'm just going to create this. So once I create this, was it the help text I created? Let me refresh this. I know there is already help desk in, yeah. So I was trying not to name this the same, give it the same name with the built-in. So if you look at this, you see I have the help desk, and this is the description, and you can see the type is showing custom, and you can see the tag is actually showing privileged. So if we want to assign users this permission, we can as well assign users the role from our entry ID. So now you can see I have add assignment. And one thing you would see when it comes to adding roles in the entry ID, we have what we call privilege identity management. You need the P2 license to be able to actually perform tasks around that. So what that is going to do, you're going to see we have eligible and then we have the active. For the eligible, basically, the user, they need to actually activate this particular role when you assign them, when you assign the role to the user. That means they need to carry out action. But for the active assignments, they don't need to carry out any action. But then we can just come here, click on role assignment, and once we, I think someone's mic is echoing. Okay, once we click on the membership, okay, once we click on the membership, you can see the scope. We can choose to, you know, select the scope, and then we can select a member, and I can just select one of the members I have here, and I can go next, and I have the option to choose if I want this role to be eligible. That means this role is actually assigned to this user, but this user needs to take action to activate this particular role. And permanent eligible just means it's just going to be permanent, but you need to take action. And if I choose to remove this, then I can set a time frame for which this user will be eligible for this role. So we can then just click on assign, and that's how we assign roles to this user. And the permissions I selected when creating that custom role, that's exactly what that user will be able to perform. And for the administrative unit, I'm just trying to, rush because of time. But if you look at the administrative unit, you can see now with the administrative unit, we can actually create an administrative unit where we can assign roles to users to manage the objects in or resources in the administrative unit. But one feature here that I like is you can see restrict management administrative unit. So if you look at this, basically once I click on this, any admin that have a role that is org wide, that's the tenant wide, would not be able to use that role assigned to them to manage the objects in this administrative unit. So with this, we can create an administrative unit, and it's just probably going to be something like this where you have users, and when you look at these users, you can come and as well see the roles that you can assign. And if you click on the role that you have here, you would see the user, right? So when you look at this, you will see that Abe actually have a particular role, and you can see the role was direct assignment. And if you look at the scope, right, you'll see that the scope is on the administrative unit. But now when you look at Opeyemi and Ebenezer, you'll see that this is actually coming from the directory itself. That's the tenant itself. So if I probably don't want Ebenezer and Opeyemi to actually control this administrative unit, then I can always turn on the restriction. So that's how we can as well use the scope in terms of when we are talking about the Entra ID. So for now, there's a lot to actually speak. I can go on talking about a lot of features we have when we are dealing with role-based access control in Azure and the Microsoft Entra, but because of time, I would just stop here, and I would try my possible best to just do a short video and post it on YouTube to cover other aspect of this topic. I think I should be stopping now, and I don't know, Frank, do you still want to present, or we move it over to next week?
I'd say I'll just do share one quick thing with you. As we're up on the hour, just wanted to show something. I was going to do Copilot M365, but I'll just do one quick one on Joseph's, what Joseph done there earlier. Can you see my screen there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm in M365, and I'm just going to go into PowerPoint and blank presentation. Keep switching over there for some reason. PowerPoint, blank. It's going into OneDrive every time. That's strange. Says OneDrive is going in there. So I'm just going to open up this one. Ever see that happening before, guys? See, I clicked on. Okay, so I'll just change the account. Blank presentation. Okay.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so I don't see Copilot in here for some reason. It's just got Designer.
So using the right account.
Yeah. So this is Microsoft 365. PowerPoint. Blank presentation. Keeps bringing me to OneDrive. So we'll sort this out anyway next week. But just to show you something else here, can you see that picture there on the screen?
Oh,
Yeah, so that's what, when I'm using StreamYard, right? This is
mhm.
what I'm looking at. And can you see up in the top here all the accounts that are connected? We're actually
Yeah.
streaming
Mhm.
out to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're streaming out through 10 different platforms. So you
Mhm.
can see there's 4 LinkedIn accounts. There's my account, Stephen's account, Dan's account. Not sure, is it Solomon, is your one there?
Yes, mine is there as well. And
Yeah,
I'm also streaming on my Facebook and also on LinkedIn at the same time.
yeah. So like we're going out through 10 platforms tonight. That's just incredible. So how could we track this to see how many hits we get on the show every week? Anybody, any ideas?
That to track the what are we tracking? Is it
The
Like
audience.
the audience?
The
we
viewers.
yeah, how many hits that we would get on the show if you're streaming out through 10 platforms like that,
I
you
think that
know?
should be the sum of all the views from all the platforms.
Yeah, I must take a look at that. So listen, guys, we're um
So someone is asking on the group how he can download this the recording of what we had now.
yeah, it's on my YouTube, it's on your account.
Yeah, I think the person should be able to download from YouTube. I think it's more easier
Yeah,
that,
you should be able to
that way.
download from YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that person wants to send me, I can send them a link straight from StreamYard
Okay, that's fine then.
if they want to download it. But they can go into any one of our YouTube or LinkedIn channels and they should see it there. So guys, we're up on the hour, gone over the hour. We'll be back here again next week, some more of the same. And we might have some new speakers. Thanks everyone again, and congratulations, Joseph, for the
Yeah.
MVP.
Thank you
Congratulations,
very
Joseph.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Jerry, toast for you, Jerry.
Yeah.
So thank you
Uh,
very much, guys. For it was a great one, man. It's for all of us. It's for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah.